the skinny. You're not gonna get it here.
However you want to frame this is up to you.
Picture it, Toronto, 2008. Young man.
What are you, Sophia?
You can be Blanche.
I am Blanche. What are you talking about? Okay.
Okay.
So who are you?
So
Who are you?
So this is my thesis show.
Who are you?
My name is Sujeet
And how do we know each other?
and we know each other intimately
Why? What do you
through
mean?
intimate dialogue, conversation, cerebral mind melds,
Many hours and
many
hours
hours and hours, and we really worked at it. Anyway.
Okay, that's a good intro. I love that. Okay, so go ahead.
So
where are we?
We're at OCAD, and I moved forward into education, and so this is my master's thesis, which is called Queer Desires, and in Queer Desires, what I'm interrogating is an archive from Mauritius, a small island in the Indian Ocean, which has a archive of 175,000 photographs taken at the time when photography was in its nascency. So at one point in time, at the same time, they were talking about the rights of man, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and photography was supposed to be the democratic art form. And at the same time, they were using that art form as a form of surveillance of the indentured people who are coming to Mauritius to work, and a way to have a secondary citizenship. So I look at 3 photographs from there to show you that indentured laborer was far more complicated. Their relationships were far more complicated than what you see on the internet and what you could imagine. And so what I'm doing is I'm complicating the narrative through textiles and sugar work, and I use and I also want to make sure that I'm looking at ancestors for me as well. So I'm linked to this. But what I want to really show you is that the past is not the past, and I want people to meditate on the fact that, migrant labor is still exists today, and it's and very similar to the way it did in Mauritius. Things only morph; they don't change.
And my question to you is, what was your journey towards doing this, even taking this on? Do you want to say a little bit? Because I know a little bit, but for anybody.
Oh no, I don't know.
Anything you want to say? Listen,
what do you say? What do you say when you see injustice and you see the world might not be what you think it is? You start to dig, and there's on one of the walls there's a video of a whirling pool. It's the idea that when you see something that is so grave, you fall into it, and it breaks you up. And when it breaks you up, there's an opportunity for you to actually rebuild yourself bigger and to be a bridge. And you can, so this is what happened at OCAD for me. And working with a group of amazing people in my cohort of IMD.
And I spoke with Leighton earlier, and I spoke a little bit with Naomi as well. I'm really talk about that process, because I'm really engaged by that the idea is not like you're just your own little student with your head down doing your own thing.
Well, that is the thing, right? Is that we were doing this during COVID lockdowns, and so we formed a really good bond. And we were also looking at decolonization, and we're looking at education. We're not just looking at education being top down. We're looking at education being a circle, and that you are already coming to the table with a huge amount of knowledge already, and so we're just sharing our knowledge, and instead of it's coming from one point down, And this is what we were really able to do because our cohort was so liked to work with each other and had affinity. We were there in our cohort. We were Black, trans, Indigenous, racialized, queer, and Jewish, and Iranian, and so our conversations were global, which is normal, which is just what we do every day. But we took it and we used it to learn and to make better art. Yeah.
Right. Okay, because I was going to ask you what would you say was the impact on what you were able to, so how you thought, how you navigated, how you produced and created, right? So you just said it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to think and to be able to help each other think in different ways. I have a colleague, Paulette, who we had like hours of conversations, and we're talking about ancestors. And I'm more cut off from ancestors because of colonization. I'm at least 4 generations away from South Asia, and through that as well as that there's been a sifting of our understanding and our knowledge to be able to live within a colonial system. And Paulette is closer to Paulette, who's Indigenous, is closer to ancestors. And so in our conversations, I started to attempt to think about that idea of connecting directly with ancestors, which is not unknown in a South Asian culture. It's just sifted when you are a migrant, and navigating colonialism, right? And it happens to your parents, and they lose their histories, and purposefully, so that they can integrate. So these are the things that I start to not just rebuild, to connect, right? And to connect in the relationships that we have now in the present more fully, right? So that's what.
And I want to hear more about the show and the different pieces on what they're saying in terms of what you're telling with the story you're telling with them, right? But at another time, we'll probably chat about the interesting tensions that would evolve sometimes, right? In even those dialogues, because I know that one of the things that I work through with some of my brown and Indigenous and East Asian friends has been that whole thing around colonization also positioned us in different ways in relation to each other.
Definitely.
To mean that we navigate, right?
Definitely.
Identity in various kinds of ways, right?
And
so that sounds like that came up.
Yeah,
too,
definitely. And of course, you can't imagine the failings of our educational system, where one culture is completely erased, so that we have no points of entry of the culture that we're actually the land that we're living on. Right. This is Indigenous land, and in my work as well, there's always there's a relationship between a migrant and Indigenous people that we can have directly, and we don't have to go through a satellite, a colonial satellite as well. So these are the conversations that you have. But you're right, they're very complex, and we're always misstepping, and I'm probably misstepping now, right? Because that's just how it works. But you have to keep talking. You have to keep trying to find those connections so that we can build, right? We just have to build.
Well, tell me about some of the pieces.
Okay, so the first piece is this piece over here. I think that you can see that it's I'm navigating ancestors here. So what I'm thinking of is I was using a computer embroidery machine, so you'll see computer embroidery here.
Right.
And so what I'm doing is I'm channeling ancestors while I'm using a embroidery program where I'm stopping and starting it, because I wanted to have agency over the machine, and it might be the machine of colonialism. It's a machine that separates us from our ancestors, but I use it to our advantage. And so here I'm taking the photography and I'm mixing us together in this piece, and dipping it in sugar. And what you can see is that you can look through the frame. I'm pulling the photographs off the frame. You look through the frame, and you're taking what you want to take to discuss with your ancestors. So this is kind of a personal conversation with my ancestors. What I would like people to take from it is that so they meditate on their own ancestors as well. You don't necessarily have to know what I'm saying, just that the gesture is there and that you can have that gesture. And what happens with this is that it looks like a wave. It will harden and will be like something that looks like it's been there forever.
Right.
But if I just dip it in water, it will go back to that. It doesn't leave any traces.
Okay.
And it's about the history that doesn't leave traces that we're uncovering. People like you and me are uncovering that we're doing that work, right? The erasure is not fully erased. There are many ways of being able to connect to history, and we don't have to connect through an archive either, right? So that those panels can be the past, but they can also be the future. So it's circular.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
Great. And the piece is called?
And the piece is called, let me think, the piece is called, I'm blanking now. Oh yeah, Rouge mon langage. It's Mauritian Creole, and it's translated as my language is red, right? And it's the archive of our understanding. So we make our own. We can make our own. Yeah. So there's that. And this is a reference to a term called the Kalapani, which is an Indian Hindi term where if you leave the waters, if you cross the waters outside of India, that you will lose your society. And I'm really referencing a Mauritian poet called Kal Torabali, who says that is an opportunity for you that you're now broken up, to rebuild with much more. So what he does in his poetry, he uses all the languages that are connected to Creole and Creole as well in his poetry. And it's also a nod to Ansaldua, Gloria Ansaldua, who talks about the Nepantla, which is South American, and it's about falling into the void, being broken up, and becoming a bridge. So those two ideas of breaking up and reforming are in this room. Yeah.
You know what I'm struck by when I look at this image is also how when you look at this, right here isn't touched. Notice? I mean, there's a little trickle.
Yeah.
But most of there's space. How there's space even as we're going through these experiences. Right?
Yes.
That's what is striking me about looking at that.
Yeah. And it's just a small little vortex in a river that is very close to where my ancestors arrived in, lived in Mauritius. So this is a river that my great grandfather and grandmother would have known, right? So it's interesting on that side.
Wow.
Yeah, it's also, we're talking about migration, and I'm also talking about multiple migrations. So the black frames here can be that, the breakup, but we have multiple breakups. We're not just from one place.
Right. And water.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah.
So key, right? And the apples with the
this is from another show. The actual dirt, the land is to honor the indigenous land that I'm working on. The apple actually originates from Central Asia. So it's a migrant itself, and I've put the incense stick in there for us to have a better relationship of migrants and indigenous people, and to also to honor the land that we're working on.
Great, thank you. A few more pieces then.
And so this piece is called Kotmopalto, which is translated as where's my coat, or coat check, as I call it. I'm referencing here Edward Said, that's saying that there is no east and west, that's a construct. And so what you're looking at is two garments that one is basically European made, and one is Indian made, and you would assume that the white one was an Indian kurta, but it's not. It's Western, and this is me designing a coat, a jacket in India for it was an empowerment program where it was upskilling, helping people to learn better skills so they can earn more. So I've cut it in half, but it refers more to sort of like a Victorian sort of velvet. But what I'm taking from is from the archive, and it's actually the clothes that you would have seen in the archive that I saw that looks so modern, and it's the relationships that people have then that were much more they were much more complicated. And the images that you see that are floating around the net are always like people like standing in front of either a cane field, banana plantations, and they're just cut off from everything, and they're only in one kind of ethnography or ethnographic trace. But that's the colonized photography, cutting out everything else so that they do look like that. And really, when we say that Toronto is cosmopolitan, well, Mauritius was cosmopolitan then, just as cosmopolitan, and never was not cosmopolitan. So I'm referencing that, and the fabrics in there reference the people as well. Yeah, and it's floating. So the reason why it's floating is that it's a nod to migration, right? Not having a place. Yeah.
Wow. And then over here.
Okay. This one is about taking on this type of work, and as a person from a queer community as well, and looking my own body as a repository for history. And so that is a way that we can look at history when it's being falsely narrated for us, and connect back to our ancestors, and connect back to the past and the future through our body. I molded out of sugar. These are sugar molds. They're a cast of my chest, and I'm looking at it from the point of view of that my chest is at rest. But really, when you're looking at the photography, you're looking at a lot of bare-chested men, and it's not really the way people dressed. It's because when boats were quarantined, they would have to get rid of their clothing, and so they would be photographed like that. So you think that there's that many men that just like that's what they look like, but there was so much more. But also, if I'm not looking at the face, which the gaze was forced, the focal point now becomes the nipple. And I'm looking at the chest as the colonial machine of cutting cane. So when I'm looking at it, when it's down there like this, and I'm looking at my own and thinking about the past, also thinking what would that chest do if it was dreaming, and it would dream of much more, right? And it's dreamed of me being at rest. So this is my connection with that. It also has to do with the masculinity, and that there's so much more than just a chest being to pound on, right? There's the sweetness of your body. There's a complete relationship that you can have, that masculinity isn't just that hyper-masculine chest beating, and that's what I'm portraying here. And that's packed brown sugar on here as well. And it's just a.
Wow.
So it's just the chest. You can see it.
The knuckle.
Yeah. And it looks a little bit like sand because it's topography I'm looking at. Looking at topography because topography is we're mapped. Our identities sometimes are mapped onto us, and so here I am having the agency of looking at myself or looking at ourselves without having to go through, a colonial gaze.
And it's not a Thierry Mugler or Paco Rabanne or a Schiaparelli or a Laquan Smith.
No, it's just my body, and it's also your body being free,
Right.
being free.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's something about what you said about in the chest, the sweetness of the hopes that they carry for your chest at rest.
Yes.
That is such a link from, as you're saying, what people were going through and what they're imagining for those to come, right?
Yes.
And we talked
Yes.
earlier about, outside of this conversation, we were talking about sort of what the generation ahead of us held on to and carried to allow for us to have
Definitely.
the experience, and for even you to be here telling your story in this way, right?
Yes, definitely, and that's what I say in my preamble as well. I say I'm standing here as a privileged person, so I'm not at all embodying this. I'm not performing this. I am looking at this as a privileged person, looking at the past and extrapolating from there, right? I'm connected. But I have that agency now, so I bring it.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I think that part of what you're doing is, as you talk about that circular, right?
Yes.
So they went through something, holding the sweetness of possibility to come.
Yes.
And then you're honoring it by telling the story, right?
But I'm very clear. I'm also telling a story that's very much in the present, just
Yes.
not for me.
Yes.
Just not for my family. So it's not just as a queer person, you look at family, your family is not just genealogical. So we have the ability of telling my ancestor story so that it will help the people today. Right? I'm connecting the migrants of today, and it's a big problem.
Yeah.
And it seems to be looking at it. I feel like things are being reversed in the present, and that we're going to start seeing this as something as viable, and it's not.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that the past is.
Yeah. And for me, it's almost like creating that pathway for you to be the witness to a history that is impacting today. And it's almost that thing, I don't know if you said it earlier, but maybe work I've been doing today, where people said a lot of what we do is not just so things won't happen to us alone again,
Yes.
but so it happens to no one else alone.
No
which
one
is sort of
else.
Peace,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you have been able to benefit from positioning, sacrifice, whatever you call it, have ancestors,
Yes.
or even dreams and aspirations, right?
Yes.
But they had to get you there through lots of their own
Yes.
risk and their own sacrifices and blah blah blah.
Definitely.
And
But it
then
doesn't
now-
stop there.
No.
Right? Their struggle, the most important gift they give to us is the ability for us to be able to tell their tales so that no one else has to go through the same thing.
Exactly.
And for us to burn it down.
And I would push you to say and challenge to say that even though there are lots of ways in which we have privilege, right? That
Yeah.
intergenerational trauma
Yeah.
and colonial trauma
Oh, yes.
is all. So I think we're also telling stories that release ourselves, release our souls. I mean, we talked earlier about, so even all, and I mean, I know you always think about when you met me, but my journey too was also, how do I come to, and continue to
Yes.
come to terms? It's like what you said earlier about, even now in this conversation, probably somebody might watch and go, what the hell are they talking about? Blah, blah, blah,
Yes,
blah.
yeah.
But it's constantly evolving, right, in terms of our own understanding of our own experience, our own location, our relation to that history, and also what's happening now. Because one of the things about it not happen to anybody again is also the potential for us to become vulnerable in a system that still sees our brown and black bodies
That's for
in
sure.
ways that even when we're in those environments of privilege,
Yeah.
we've also been fucked in those environments of privilege, right? And it's still marginal. It's kind of like when you look at the NBA and the
No,
NFL, and you kind of go,
and,
all these men making lots of money, but then the
believe me.
owners, the white owners making,
Yeah.
right?
It's still the system is still it's to navigate that, and it's also say, I've been challenged on that as well, as that the body at rest, are you at rest? Right? Because you're really never. And if you look at this piece here, we're looking at a double consciousness.
Right.
We're looking at code switching too, right?
Ah,
Because
right.
we're always two people.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
So we know the
exactly.
people that have to be. You're the person that is the person here talking
Right,
to you.
right.
But then I'm also a person who knows that when I'm not in a space that I feel safe, that I am another person, and I'm not another person. I am speaking another language,
Right.
and I find that what I was doing here is all about language.
Yeah.
It's all about how do I
Yeah.
speak to my ancestors? How do I
Yeah.
speak to my own body?
Right.
And how do I speak to you and tell you relationally? How do we speak to each other? Because our experiences are not the same. But the game book that was played against us is the same. And so that's an interesting thing, and it's amazing because when you're working with other people who are working on their own, is that we are able to help each other navigate our own and also add, and yeah, that's the point. So the point is to connect, and that's why this piece, my work is not about being overwhelmingly big. It's about you being able to come and sit, and you be able to put your face right into the work. You can touch the work. I've had children sit here because that's what they do automatically.
Right.
They see this light box. They sit beside the sculptures, and they take a look at it, and they make their own ideas, and they see land. And so what they see is what they should see. That is what my art should be, right? It's what you take away. You have the agency of taking away anything that you want, but it's not monumental. It's small histories.
Well, artist friend of mine many years ago said, once I create my art, it no longer belongs to me, it belongs to the world.
Yes.
I might have an intention and a story I want to tell,
Yeah.
but lots of people have different kinds of stories
Yes.
that might resonate in something else.
Yes.
And for him, that's great. Like, because we had other people we know where artists were like, no, my work is this, and you're stupid if you don't get it. And he's like, no, I think lots of interpretations can be made of lots of things, because I have one interpretation of why I've put it in the world,
Yeah.
but other people will come and go, oh, that looks like something from my experience that is not my
Definitely.
experience, right?
Definitely.
And he says that's the power of art as well, is
That
that,
is-
and
that
creativity is that people can bring and can expand the notion of the story, and it builds the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Beyond, which is what we want, right? You're opening a door and saying, hey, I'm thinking this, or I'm telling my story, it looks like this. What does it look like to you? Even when you interact with what I'm presenting, and then because that's a dialogue space, right?
Yes.
And I think it just makes it bigger and grander in terms of, I think, the larger conversation, because ultimately what we're all here doing, at least I'm doing, and I think you're doing too, is it's about fighting for real liberation,
Yes.
right? Like
Definitely.
freedom.
The goal is that. The
Yeah.
goal is that, and you can't be liberated if the people around you aren't either, right? There's no liberation, just singular.
Yeah.
So that's what I feel like. That's why I want my work to be accessible, and even I've tried my best not to have my work be the type of craft that people can do at home, and I very much have lived and worked in the company of women, and have been raised in the company of women, and the work that was the artists that have put out the most amazing work that were not recognized because that was women's work. I think about that all the time, and I think to myself, now it is because we know what it is. It's real art. Just because a certain group of men have decided what art is going to be, right? We have to all fight against that. So my work references it sometimes, but it's also saying, you know what, artists, you can make it out of the simplest things, right?
And that is so true also for artists of color, right?
Yes.
Who historically weren't even in museums or galleries or
Yeah.
shows ever happened. And
Yes.
so when we now in this generation hear, what? Like it was the 70s before there was a Black Arts Collective that put on a show in New York, or Chicago or whatever, and you go,
But there were artists before.
Of
They were
course.
working in their kitchens. They were working. They were
exactly.
working outside.
Yeah.
There were artists, and we will find them.
Exactly. But there were artists also creating amazing work too.
Yes.
Who were doing little things in their little neighborhoods and communities.
Definitely.
Whatever high art or whatever, or you know, what is it? I forget the word you'd use, but they were not taking that up in the same way, right?
Yes.
And recognizing and valuing it, because there was a narrow construct of what was art and what was fine art, and that's why when you hear things like about, you know, what do they call that, folk art, or, you know, outside art, like all those kinds of terminology, which was really about marginalizing
and it's to put
art,
it down.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, and that's what. Oh yes, and I must tell you as well is I call my art Artistan, and I call this place Artistan. And that's the third space, which Homi Bhabha is a cultural theorist who talks about these spaces where you can think, you have the ability to think above the present politics, and think about things how they can be, and so that's where we don't have to think about being an artisan. We don't think about being an artist. We don't have to think about what that is. It is what it is. It is that conversation of your hand, material, and thought, right? And instead of categorizing it for a certain, to be monetized. And so that's where I came to, that we have to build these spaces ourselves, right? And even though they might happen in a place that was steeped in colonialism, we can still open the space up for others to be able to sit in the space and contemplate something better.
As long as it's the frame that's currently existing, let's use it for what we can as we are imagining.
That is I'm learning.
Creating.
That is I'm learning. There are people like you that are far ahead of me for that, but I'm learning about that. Is that not to cut it all off, just be it all, and no ors.
And then sometimes it's okay to, because there's some people we know who are like, I'm not going to join those big galleries or whatever. I'm going to do my little thing over here. All of it, right?
Yes.
Is also part of the conversation and the process, because some people are in those systems and have to survive in them, and so they'll make it what they can. One thing I was thinking about was, you know, when you describe going in those archives and seeing those images, and probably also coming across those clothing that existed back then that people wore, right? How that in and of itself is creativity, right? It's art in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at those, as you said, those images, and go, wait a minute, look at the fine saris or the fine Western
look at the
whatever,
codes,
right?
look at the, and it's so funny is that, you know, when you cut yourself off of what you actually do, if I said, oh, I'm an artist, I'm not looking at that. That's ridiculous.
Right.
I'm a fashion designer. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the clothing, and then I start scrutinizing it, and then you start realizing how cosmopolitan that was, and where those links go, right? And how we always think that, you know, there's a certain modernity in saying that Toronto is cosmopolitan when Mauritius was cosmopolitan in the 1700s. So if Mauritius was cosmopolitan in the 1700s, then what does it mean to be cosmopolitan? Nothing. We've met before. We've met before.
Navigating diversity, navigating complex sexualities and gender identity presentations were all part of the landscape that colonization came and fucked with and constructed a whole other narrative that we're now trying to. That's why people say, oh, this is all new. No, we're actually reclaiming a lot of what was lost by the interruption of many of our cultures that we're finally figuring things out. Not perfectly, so I don't want to romanticize. I'm sure we still would have to negotiate shit, and people were but the thing, there was rich cultures of interrogation, engagement, blah, 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 that were going on, that suddenly got focused on dealing with these white people who were coming in to do bullshit and to survive them, right? So, anyway, anything else you'd like to say? God,
thank you humbly
we're
for
over half an hour.
I was like, can't believe this time I've said okay. In 2008 in London.
Was your famous refrain, enough!
Enough! Put that camera away! That's it. Put that camera away!
And now you're actually, okay, interview.
No, I didn't.
No, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
Okay, no, you told me not to pan too far away.
Why? Because, oh my God.
Well, you were saying you were going to give me the skinny.
No, do not put this up on the net. No,
Well, that
it's
was
not.
your other thing. I remember you'd say to
I
me-
can't give you the skinny. Skinny's in 2011.
I remember when you used to say to me, you used to say, what are you going to do with this? Are you
Yeah,
gonna
what
put
are you
this
going to do with this? Like, I'd like to know. Anyway,
Are you
that's
going to put this
enough.
somewhere? You can't put this somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's another.
I know. And no, it's not going to get uncomfortable the way you used to. You're like, what was it again? Oh, no, not on camera. What's it on camera?
Okay, put this off
All
now.
right, now?
No,
all right,
no,
so
no,
you can
bye.
say, and okay,
Bye.
bye. And I'll show you the poster for his work. What I'm curious what this was.
Oh, this is for you. This is a Mauritian tea. Oh, there's not much
I
left.
helped myself. I did.
Did you? Okay, good.
Figured.
So, grown in Mauritius and with vanilla, and so it's also migration and trade and but in my youth, when we were in Mauritius, the smell of boiling, this tea boiling and boiling milk, is what you wake up to. So you're actually smelling Mauritius when you smell that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then this book, I was curious if it's available in.
And that is just in the library at OCAD, but
it's not a book.
totally available to reference.
Purchase?
And we're going to have it online as well, just momentarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not available to purchase yet. Or
No.
It's
no.
great. I was flipping through thinking, what
Did
a
you like
really
it? It was
wonderful.
conversations.
It was a wonderful collection. As I
Yeah.
said, I took photos of your section and photos of Leighton's section
Yeah.
and I love the one about the pussy, the woman who talks about her.
Oh yeah,
know,
Susan.
yeah.
And you know what? It's like they're the three people who like we. It was a course actually that we built ourselves as students. Our professor facilitated that, but really it was our conversations on identity, and it helped us form our work as well. And so everybody was free to put something into it, and so we edited it and published it during the time that we've been here.
Great.
Yeah, it's called The Loophole.
The loophole.
Yeah.
I went through the opening pages as well. Yeah, it's great. And so this is the poster, Queer Desires, everyone.
Oh,
No, you don't want that?
yeah, not too much.
What do you mean?
Of the
Of the place effect
yeah,
here?
the
Okay.
the archival, if it's
Oh,
okay.
really?
Yeah.
Even though it's-
Well, you can.
I did
but-
earlier when I walked through before
That's
you came.
fine. That's
and
fine.
showed
It's
them.
okay. It's okay.
Once I put it up, it's like.
Yeah, I know. Once it's up, it's up.
And also, I was touching those things earlier thinking, and I had it on video and I said, oh dear, sorry Sujeet, I'm probably not supposed to touch the art, but I'm touching the art. So I'm glad you finally said, oh, you're supposed to touch those.
You can.
Which I did.
Yes, you can.
All right, folks, there it is. Sujeet Senek. There? Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.